Okay, so maybe we can get started, Mariam, if you agree.
Yeah. I'm all ready.
Okay, so I will introduce you briefly and then leave the floor to you. So, welcome everybody to this Why PhD session, where we have the pleasure and the honor to host Maryam Alimardani. She is connected via Zoom. She's associate professor at the Vrije Universiteity in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and she has been working on brain-computer interfacing and human-computer interaction. Got her PhD in Osaka, in Japan, and basically her research focuses on developing BCI systems that facilitate interactions with technologies using electroencephalography brain signals and AI models. And today, she was so kind to agree to not just talk to us about her research and her topics, but also to add to that PhD flavor. So she will just also talk about how her PhD brought her here and what kind of journey that was, both the good and the bad sides, probably, which is
Yeah.
the instructive part of this session. The audience, you see people in the room, but the audience is mixed master and PhD students. So,
Oh, really? Okay. Uh-huh.
so we have a mixture of experiences here. So it's a
Okay.
pleasure to have you. Feel free to start whenever you want. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, for inviting me. Indeed, this is a very different presentation. I normally talk only about the research content that we do, but today I had to actually reflect on why I chose the career path that I did. And it was very inspiring. Like I took a moment to think back and I realized I'm very happy with the choice I made. And I wish with this presentation, I can transparently communicate some of the advantages that this choice has brought to my life, and of course, some of the challenges that I need to face at the time, and how I went about it. So yeah, that's the title I chose for today's talk, Navigating the PhD Journey. It's a journey and it's a long one. It feels kind of long. It's only 4 or 3 years, depending on the country you are in. And I'm going to talk mainly about the lessons that I personally learned from the journey. And my journey was very unique because at the time I was in a country that was not my home country. So I was an international student. I was doing my PhD in Japan. And I needed to work with both robots and brain-computer interfaces. So my research was quite interdisciplinary. So that adds to the challenges. I'm going to come back to this point later. So a little bit more introduction on uh, like the different stages of my studies and career. So I actually started my PhD program in Japan in 2012. At the time, I had already done my bachelor's and master's program in Japan. So I think it's important that I say this because I was culturally familiar with the country that I chose to do my PhD in. And I think if you are an international student, this can work into your advantage. I did it at Osaka University at a very famous robotics laboratory named Hiroshi Ishiguro Lab. So he's like a famous roboticist who has made a robot of himself. And in his lab, we use the robots that look like humans to study different psychology concepts, different telecommunication, telepresence technical advancements. And my research was sort of like at the intersection of cognitive science and neuroscience, as well as engineering, to look into the sense of embodiment. I'm going to talk about this a bit more. Then once I finished my PhD at Osaka University, I got a fellowship. It was a personal grant that I got from the Japanese Ministry of Education, JSPS, which is a funding agency, to do my postdoc at Tokyo University. I also talk a little bit about the research that I did there. And then after that, I decided that I want to change a little bit of cultural exposure that I had at the time. And I turned into Europe and I found a position at Tilburg University in the Netherlands. I was with Tilburg University for about, say, 5 years. And then it's been 2 years that I'm with Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So for me, this cultural exchange that I've been able to get through my academic career. That's also one of the positive things that when I reflect back, I think being in academia enabled me to move around and experience different environments, different intellects, interaction with different intellects, and generally working cultures. Okay, so about my research, let's start it. I have a few slides about what I do in my research, and then a few slides at the end, why I did choose to do a PhD in this research topic, and what kind of recommendations I can give to students who want to pursue this career path. I work with brain-computer interfaces, and these are systems that collect brain signals from a human brain. They try to decode the signals into interpretable commands for external devices using AI techniques. And once I enable humans to control these external devices, I create this feedback loop. We call it the neurofeedback or BCI loop, in order for them to learn from their active or passive engagement interaction with the system. So this feedback you see as the fourth element of the interaction is really important, especially if you want to gain control over your brain signals, you want to be able to modulate it for neurorehabilitation reasons, or just generally to augment cognitive functions of humans as if like you do it. I have a few examples that I will showcase later where you try to help people to improve their attention level by giving them passive feedback from the technology they are interacting with that is monitoring their brain signals. So that's essentially what BCIs are, and that's the core of my research. But I actually got introduced into this BCI research through my research with robots. And the story is really interesting. So at the time, I was in Ishiguro lab working with this human-like robots, and the topic of my research was embodied interaction. So how people controlling these very human-like robots can actually have a sensation of body ownership or embodiment of these robots through the feeling of agency. This is very similar to the rubber hand illusion, if you're familiar with it, that in which the brain can be tricked into believing that an object that looks like a human body and moves according to your intentions can be part of you. And so this illusion is very interesting from a neuroscientific and cognitive science perspective, but it's also very interesting from a technical perspective, because for controlling and telepresence feelings of these robots, this sensation can actually help the user a lot to gain better skills in interacting with a robot. But then my research question was that what if you take the actual movement from the real body of the human away and leave a sense of agency for them by just enabling them to control this human-like robot by the power of their brain signals. So that's how I got introduced into BCI research. I had the luxury of having one of these EEG systems in the lab. The EEG systems are these like electrode cap that collect electroencephalogram signals from the surface of the scalp. So no intrusive surgery whatsoever. It's non-intrusive, and you can apply it to any healthy person. My participants came into the lab. As you can see, this is the setup that I created for my experiments, and I conducted a number of studies for my research with this setup, where they sat in one room and they were equipped with this EEG cap. I developed a system that could collect brain signals and translate them in real time using machine learning techniques into movement planning. So every time the user had an intention or imagination of a movement of one of their hands, the system could actually capture it, could extract this intention from the brain signals and translate it into the movement of the same hand of the robot. And we created a setup where the hands of the user were hidden. This is very similar to the rubber hand illusion. This is a very famous illusion in psychology field. And instead of looking at their own hand, they were looking at the robot's hand. So as you can see in this setup, every time they held an intention of movement, they could see the robot implementing that movement. And we wanted to first confirm whether with this setup, so controlling the robot with your brain signals, you will be able to trick the brain into having the illusion of owning this robot hand. And the confirmation is actually quite interesting and easy. You actually threaten the hand with a painful stimuli, and you look at people's reaction. So if you inject or put a knife onto the robot's hand, they would show some stress responses. And this stress response of the participant is a sign that they consider this as a threat to the real body. And then we also conducted a few studies how this setup, where they have BCI control of the robot, would enable them to control the robot better. So this was more about modulation of brain activity and how much performance improvement you can see when you enable people to have a heightened sense of embodiment and body ownership illusion. So those were some of the things that I did for my PhD research. I'm not going to go too much into the details of the research results, but what I would like to know from this research is that, at least for me, this was very technically challenging, because at the beginning of the journey, I had to know a bit of neuroscience, a bit of cognitive science, a bit of philosophy, actually, because there was like this mind-body dualism that I had to tap in. And of course, the engineering part, where I had to develop the whole system, deal with the, the robot and the controller bugs. So there was a lot of challenges before this system came together for me to be able to conduct my experiment. And now the experiments are a different story, because once you start doing human experiments, you realize there are also a lot of ethical and technical challenges there. So this is just an introduction for you to know that the research there was not easy, and some of the points that I'm going to make later are actually related to this cross-discipline, interdisciplinary research that you do. Then moving to my postdoc, I actually made a shift from these active BCIs, where you actually want to move a stuff and think about movement, and the BCI translates it into passive BCIs, where the user is more engaged in a learning or mentally engaging task, and the system is monitoring passively their cognitive or affective states. And this can be really useful in social robotics, because oftentimes the interaction with social robots is measured through subjective surveys that is collected only at the end of the interaction, so maybe a bit late for any real-time adaptation. Or through behavioral methods, where you have to video record the user and look into their gazing patterns, what kind of gestures they make. And this can be kind of intrusive and is still not very informative of some of the cognitive states, such as attention levels. And I actually published a review paper in 2020, where I reviewed a number of studies that try to look into cognitive and affective states of user through EEG in human-robot interaction experiments. And the result of that systematic review showed that there are very few studies that have tried to integrate neurophysiological signals into that interaction and evaluation setup. So that was actually the topic of my postdoc, where I conducted a series of studies where we had adaptive, like neuro-adaptive social robots versus non-adaptive robots in a learning or therapeutic interaction. And we looked into how adaptation using the brain signals can bring in benefit to the user experience and user performance on the task. These are some of the images from the studies I did. I think I have some time to talk about them. So, for example, the image you see on the left side, those are related to a learning-based study. So we used the neuro-adaptive robot in an educational setting. In this case, the user was supposed to learn a fake language from the robot. And we created two conditions. In one condition, the robot would monitor attention level of the user as they were learning from it. And as soon as there was an attention drop detected, the robot will repeat the information that was given right before, and would also provide an additional iconic gesture to deepen the understanding of the vocabulary, the fake vocabulary. We chose a fake language to make sure nobody had any background knowledge of it. And in the other condition, the robot would do this gesture and repetition of information randomly. And the results of the study showed that people in the neuroadaptive condition had a better recall of information. So they learned more fake vocabulary of that language after the interaction was over, when they did a test on the fake language, compared to the people who were interacting with the randomly behaving robot. On the top right, you see an example of study I did in Tokyo together with another postdoc at the time. And this study was focused on child-robot interaction. And it was a very similar setup where we compared a robot interaction with so this was more about the presence of the robot in the interaction and confirmation of what sort of benefit the robot brings to the learning experiences, as seen in the neurophysiological responses. And here we looked into engagement neuromarkers. So there are some neuromarkers that are confirmed by neuroscience literature in the EEG signals that you can look at and see, and they sort of like give you an indication of how much engagement people showed in the task they were doing at the time with a certain technology or a certain partner. So this can be in human-human experiment or human technology interaction experiments. And our results from this experiment showed that the presence of the robot in that learning experience could actually heighten the engagement of the children in the learning experience, as was evidenced by the neurophysiological signal. And to that date, there were a number of studies that had shown this through subjective or behavioral measures, but no study could validate it through a neurophysiological signal. And that was the novelty of our work. Then after that, when I moved to the Netherlands, I continued doing research with BCIs and robots, so in the context of neuroadaptive human-robot interaction. But I also deviated a little bit from the social robotics context and went into more immersive interactive technology interaction. So I had a number of projects that were focused on development of BCIs that monitored attention or creativity in immersive environments. So we either use these neurotechnology the equipment, so either the hardware or software, the EEG hardware, to either validate the interaction, so whether the interaction design works or not, and then secondly, to adapt the interaction. So most often our studies look like an A/B testing, where we have like an adaptive and neuroadaptive condition versus a non-adaptive condition, or we have two types of interaction design and we want to compare them and find an evidence in the neurophysiological signals that one interaction works better than the other. So what you see, for example, in bottom left is a setup of an experiment that one of my PhD students did together with Royal Netherlands Air Force in a project that is focused on development of BCIs for pilot training in VR simulators. So we know that pilots experience a very high workload when they get training in simulators, as well as in real cockpits and real flights. And oftentimes the workload measurement is only done at the end of the learning experience, at the end of the training, or it's monitored behaviorally by the instructor that accompanies them as a co-pilot in the cockpit. And the idea here was that whether we can actually use this neurotechnology hardware, so in this case EEG signals, also later we all had cardiography, which is like ECG signals from the heart, to look into some of the neurophysiological indicators of workload so that we can measure the workload of pilots in real time and help them avoid the overload at that time. The excessive workload of pilots can be really dangerous because if they are overloaded cognitively, they no longer hear the alarm in the cockpit. And this is a phenomenon known as the inattentional deafness that can lead to very risky and fatal accidents. So that's actually what the whole project was about, to create BCI systems in the context of VR flight training to be able to monitor workload of the pilots as they go through the training and be able to make predictions about when is the right time to provide feedback to them or to change the learning activity or the flight maneuver they were tasked with. Another project that a group of my students had started like a few years back and are still developing is an EEG-based neurofeedback game. So they develop games that are meant to help people suffering from ADHD to basically engage them in a task that can help them focus their attention better. And of course, neurofeedback has been around for some time already. The focus of these projects is to introduce gamifying elements to the interaction in order to help the people to engage better in the training and achieve better results. So as you can see, this is a very BCI-ish experiment. Combined with like serious game design. It's not really related to robots, but the knowledge that I had gathered at the time as a PhD student has now expanded into other domains and does offer applications beyond just robotics field. Okay, so that's some of the things that I did in the past. And I would like to use a few minutes I have left to tell you why I did a PhD, why I chose to do a PhD at the time. I try to be very honest about it. I think the first and foremost important reason I wanted to stay in academia was the freedom that I enjoyed at the time. I thought, and I still think today, that I'm not meant for a 9-to-5 job. I really enjoy my intellectual freedom and autonomy in arranging my schedule. And I think academia offers you that. Of course, you end up working more than 40 hours per week, but when and how you work is really up to you. And I think that's one of the reasons that I highly appreciate being an academic. The second reason was that I really like learning. I have a passion for learning, but even beyond that, I like nurturing and mentoring. So at the time, I wanted to learn something, and I wanted, to gather some experience and knowledge for myself to be able to do things. But then later, I realized that I'm actually a really good leader in managing projects where there are multiple people working together on the same research concept. And for that, I can actually communicate some of the skills I have learned and enable others to do the same thing and just sit back and watch them grow. And this is a very rewarding experience for me. So I think me staying in academia and teach, and so like staying in academia is not just about teaching, it's also about supervising the next generation of researchers. This is very rewarding and fulfilling for myself. And then the last reason I wanted to do a PhD was that I wanted to do something cool with my life. And like whatever the interpretation of that can be, for me, this was more of leaving behind a legacy. So I didn't see myself becoming just another unknown person in the landscape of industry or companies. I really wanted to do something that was meaningful for myself and something that I could leave behind as the work that I did for myself. Of course, this is always in collaboration with some other smart people, but I can claim that this was my work. My PhD thesis was my work, and I'm very proud that I did it, and it's cool and I like it. But of course, there were challenges along the way. And I think when people tell you, well, I'm a PhD, I'm an academician, I'm a professor, well, that sounds really nice. That it comes with a lot of credit and an acknowledgement, but you don't really see how much of pain and challenges they had to go through to get there. And if you really want that, you also need to be advised on what to expect before you step into this world. And for me, those were two types of challenges: the academic challenges and the mental challenges. And I also observe it in my PhD students and generally all PhD students in our department. So some of these are the things that I experienced myself, and some of them are things I observe, especially the young generation of researchers experience. I'm going to start with the academic challenges that you should expect if you step in an academic environment. So the first thing is that choosing your topic and supervisor can be very challenging. And it is actually something that you cannot predict. So sometimes you think that you really love the topic, you really think that it's going to go well with this supervisor. And then after a while, you realize, well, no, it's not exactly what I thought. I'm no longer motivated to continue this, or the interaction with the supervisor is not going really well. So my suggestion is that really do research before you step into a program and you choose a supervisor to work with. It might be a little bit harder these days because oftentimes PhDs are paid positions, so you need to apply for a job and it looks like that you want it and they are selecting you. But I always tell my master students when they apply for a PhD position, look, you also have the right to select. So if you go for an interview and you already feel something is off with that supervisor and the team, then you need to think twice. The other thing is that at the beginning, it can feel very overwhelming. There is just too much to learn. And especially if you work in interdisciplinary or cross-discipline challenges on like a large consortium, large projects with lots of topics and lots of PhD students, and you need to collaborate with different people on different topics, this can be a lot to handle at the beginning. And my advice there is that take it one step at a time. I will come back to this point later. The confidence can go up and down, but then eventually the competence needs to build up over years. It's not something you can do overnight or over weeks of reading or experimentation. Even me today, I still feel every day I need to learn more. And there is no ending to that learning. And that's actually part of the joy I take from this journey. There is workload and publication pressure. Surprise, surprise, that's all academia is about. Now, there has been a little bit of effort to change the culture there, to make the recognition of academic work, of research, beyond just publishing in high-impact journals, but it doesn't mean that it's completely dismissed. As a researcher, you need to publish, and publication is not easy. Sometimes it can take a year or more to just have your reviews and decisions on your journals and journal papers, and that's just the writing and publishing process. The data collection and all the experimental preparation that you had to do, that's another few months or a year of work. So from the moment you have an idea to the moment you have a published paper based on that idea, you can consider maybe a year or two that you have invested your energy and time in. So it kind of moves very slow, and it's very hard to stay motivated in this process. So you really need to be passionate about your topic so that you can keep yourself motivated and keep your eyes on the big reward at the end of the road. The other group of challenges that I would like to talk about is mental challenges. And this list of mental challenges can be very different from one person to another person, depending on your upbringing, your cultural background, and your previous experiences in having a job or working together with a team. One thing that I can say for sure is that academia is a very hard place to maintain a work-life balance. I said that you enjoy freedom, but I also have to say that if you want to be an achieving, high-performing academician, researcher, having good publications, even as a PhD student, you will experience a high workload. So that is something that some people cannot really handle well. There will be weeks that you have lesser of workload. There will be weeks that are leading to a deadline. And so you need to work like 60 hours, 80 hours to make that deadline. You need to be ready to make the sacrifices. So for example, if there is a birthday party, you don't go to that so that you make your deadline for the conference and you are happy with that. So you don't regret the choice that you had for your PhD, because this is something you are still passionate and motivated about. The other thing that can be challenging sometimes, and I have seen cases that this has led to quitting of the PhD and stopping the project, is the relationship with supervisor and teammates. We're all humans. It's difficult to navigate different styles of management and social interaction within a lab culture. I highly recommend, as I said, that you do good research before you start working with a team on a PhD project. But once you do, please learn about the lab culture and the management style of your supervisor. Try to make it work. Try to have very open communication with your supervisor. Be open about your expectations. Also listen to their expectations so that you do not really end up having a more of a relationship issue than a content issue. Because once there is a relationship issue, then it will be really hard to commit to the hard work that you need to do technically for the project. Stress management is something that is hard and is a challenge for many people. And this relates to the previous two items: work-life balance, relationship. Expect that sometimes things are not going as they were promised to you in fairy tales. Once that happens, stress can build up. Be prepared to manage that and get over such challenges. And then there is very high competition and, of course, rejection. You will not be an independent and a confident researcher if you haven't been rejected in your lifespan of your career. My papers have been rejected, I think, every time I made a new submission. So it's just so natural to be rejected by other peers, and you need to be ready to defend your ideas. You need to be ready to not take it personally and make it about content. So it doesn't come easy, but when it comes, when you win that competition, when you go beyond the rejection and you finally make the acceptance, that small achievement, that the smallest step, means a lot, and you can take a lot of joy from that. And one of the things that I also see a lot as a mental challenge among PhD students and generally students is perfectionism and imposter syndrome. I think all of us want to do really well, but at the time we feel like, oh, we are not enough. And there are always, like, you're surrounded by a lot of smart people, so it's really hard to keep up. And for this, there is like a well-known psychological phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, when you start knowing about a concept, you immediately feel like you're confident, you know a lot about it, you feel that you have lots of knowledge and skills in the field. But as you learn more, you start having less and less confidence in what you can actually do or what you know. And that's the moment that valley is the moment that you fall into the imposter syndrome. You just need to hang in there and get beyond it. Just improve your skills, improve your knowledge. And this imposter syndrome is something that does not only happen during your PhD, it can stay with you throughout your academic journey. But there will be a moment that you finally build up your confidence again and come back to that expert/guru mentality. Okay, so this is my last slide. If you're going for a PhD, my recommendation for you is that please know why you're doing it. Do it for your curiosity. Select the topic that you really love. Don't do it for the credentials. Then choose your topic and supervisor carefully. I cannot emphasize this enough. Look for someone as your supervisor that is supportive, communicative, and invested in mentoring you. Ideally, if possible, already do an internship or a master thesis with them before you commit to doing like 3-year or 4-year of PhD program with them. Work on the soft skills early on. And this is something I highly recommend. Try to improve your time and the stress management skills already before you start. So that can already help you as a student. You don't need to be a PhD researcher to enjoy the benefits that soft skills bring to you. Practice work-life balance, have self-discipline, and these can all help you to be more effective and efficient. And then also improve your communication skills. If you are not an English speaker, English native speaker, work on your writing skills, work on your presentation and speaking skills, and this can come a lot to your help when you're doing your research. So the content is one thing, selling what you did is another thing, and communication skills can help you a lot on that. And the last thing is that if you are doing a PhD, choosing an academic career is not the only option. Luckily, we are living in a world that even working in high-tech companies, having a PhD can help you a lot to secure a job at like big tech companies. And I think you need to keep that door open. So do the PhD research with the intention that you have all these career options open to you, and start looking around for the future plans very early on in your journey. So with that, I would like to thank you and close this presentation. I hope I could give you some insight, maybe motivated you to do PhD, maybe demotivate you if this is not really for you. Whatever you choose as your career path, I wish you luck.